In many parts of the world, rivalry between two men has shaped the course of nations. In Sudan, two generals have torn the country apart in a brutal civil war. Nearby in Ethiopia, two men plunged the nation into a devastating war as they too sought power and control. On the other side of the world, in Venezuela, the tussle between two men brought the country into political crisis. Now the same is happening again in South Sudan. Two men and their volatile rivalry may take the country to the brink of civil war. On one side is the President Salva Kiir, and on the other, his first Vice President Riek Machar. So what's their story?
Both of them fought on opposite sides during the Civil War. And then when they signed an agreement in 2005, they came together and formed a regional government based in Juba. In 2011, the country became independent with Salva Kiir as the president and Riek Machar as his deputy. But the relationship has not been actually working out well.
This is Daniel Akej. He's followed the relationship of these two men closely.
They have been sort of like challenging each other. The president sees Machar as a challenger. Machar sees the president as someone who is clinging on to power. And so they started to fight with each other in public forums, challenging one another, blaming each other for the failures that were seen in the country. And this actually plunged the country into civil war in 2013.
And the war Daniel just mentioned left 400,000 people dead and millions displaced. Then came the 2018 peace deal between the two men, which was meant to restore calm.
It was a pact between the political class, and it did not really resolve the problems of everyday people who were affected by war.
This is Dr. Jot Maduk Jot. He understands the role ethnicity plays in this rivalry.
It's a power contest. But in order to efficiently and to win this contest, these leaders often reached for the ethnic card as a way to entice people onto their side.
Salva Kiir is from the Dinka, the largest ethnic group in the country, while Riek Machar is from the Nuer, the second largest. Both the president and his vice have weaponized their ethnicities to recruit younger people.
They are still being mobilized along ethnic lines, but that trend is changing increasingly, because now I think a lot of young people, especially those who have had the chance to go to school and understand the world slightly differently, are seeing that what they are looking for is not to fight each other. What they are looking for is to have access to a stake in the country.
But the fear of ethnic tensions remains. In March this year, the White Army, a militia linked to Riek Machar's forces from the Civil War, attacked and seized a military base. Days later, as a UN helicopter attempted to evacuate government troops, a UN crew member and at least 27 soldiers were killed. The government retaliated with aerial bombardments, resulting in civilian deaths and injuries. Stripped of his role, Riek Machar was charged with treason, murder, and crimes against humanity. The cost of the unease in the country has been hard on the civilian population.
Well, the current humanitarian crisis in South Sudan is quite critical. The country is facing a lot of underlying problems.
Abiol Lual Deng, international relations analyst, says the country is fighting on multiple fronts. The government has not been able to provide basic infrastructure and policies to deal with issues such as climate change-induced disasters.
There's recurrent flooding going on in northern and middle and eastern parts of the country. Although South Sudan is not a country that contributes to greenhouse gas effects, because there's not much industry in the country, it is one of the countries that has been the most affected by climate change. This creates issues around food production, it creates issues around food conservation, and also creates tension between different communities in terms of access to the food that is able to be grown locally.
Jacqueline Nasiwa, an international lawyer and activist, says the situation is even worse for women and girls.
I work with survivors of conflict, and particularly with conflict-related sexual violence victims. And in this, you find that the victims themselves are largely unsupported, especially women, and others who have children born out of rape. If we don't stop this violence, we are denying the next generation of the younger people their future. They grow with the trauma, which is intergenerational, and exposing them to always a situation of violence makes them also to grow up thinking violence is the way of survival.
Corruption has also been blamed for driving tensions within the country. Both Salva Kiir and Riek Machar have long used political patronage to hold control and win favours.
South Sudan's not a poor country, and yet its people are totally dependent on aid. And this is one of the reasons I think that the Commission on Human Rights has argued that, in fact, corruption is killing South Sudan's people, most of whom go hungry, and that's not a great place to actually be.
Yasmin Sooka authored a 2-year report looking at corruption in South Sudan. It alleges billions of dollars have gone missing from oil revenue over the past few years. The report raises concerns over the lack of basic care available for ordinary citizens.
When you look at the kind of money that is being spent on the president's own medical health unit, compared to the fact that hardly any of that goes into the medical health care services for ordinary citizens, I think you get a huge sense of how unequal and utterly dependent people are on the humanitarians. And as some of them point out, when you meet with them, all they want to do is to be able to return to their homes. They want to be able to farm, look after their livestock.
The government dismissed the findings and attributed South Sudan's economic problems to conflict, climate change, and falling sales of crude oil. Now these same people find themselves at a crossroads again. So what do our experts think will happen next? Will there be yet another war for the world's youngest nation?
The South Sudanese people, they were surveyed in 2017. And they were asked simple questions like, what went wrong in South Sudan? And people say that these destructive competitions between the two top leaders is the reasons we found ourselves where we did. They said, as long as the two leaders are there, they will never work together. So if you put them together in the same government, the government will remain stagnant.
There is a crisis in the country. And that crisis is not a legal crisis. It is a political crisis. Therefore, Dr. Riek and President Kiir should seek political solutions to the problems that are facing this country, including their own relationship to each other.
I think the best thing to be done is for the international community and especially the regional economic communities, the regional bodies such as IGAD or the East African Community. They are probably the best situated to push all actors to continue to go to the meeting table, and also to continue to reiterate that all actors in any political or potential conflict in South Sudan must keep in mind the young population of the country, the young people who desire peace, many of whom have never known more than 5 to 10 years without conflict.
In the meantime, all eyes are on the outcome of the trial of Riek Machar and his co-accused. What does it mean for the decades-long rivalry between President Salva Kiir and his former Vice President Riek Machar? Together, they hold the fate of South Sudan and its people in their hands.